I have a very important question for this morning. Where is your ketchup? Yes, where is your ketchup? Now, if you don't have ketchup, you've got to sub something else in for that in your refrigerator. But the question for this morning is, where is your ketchup? Do you know where it is? If you're in the Zoom room, raise your hand if you know exactly where your ketchup is. And I'm not talking in the refrigerator. I'm talking my ketchup is in the refrigerator on the door of the left-hand side on the second shelf. And it's kind of to the left of the shelf. It's not in the center. It's not on its side. It's to the left. Do you know where your ketchup is? Where is your spare ketchup? Do you have a spare ketchup? Do you know where that's located? Do you know what brand it is? Do you know how much sugar it has in it? What do you know about your ketchup? Is it always the same ketchup? Or is it a different brand of ketchup every time? Do you find yourself rummaging around to try to find the ketchup because you don't know where the ketchup is? Today's topic conversation is not all about ketchup, but it is about communication, and it's about how everything in our lives communicates. Everything speaks and shares a message, sends a message about who we are, about how we operate, about what's in our minds, about our consciousness. And we can learn about ourselves and through others when we begin to pass beyond just what is spoken and just what is intentionally communicated. And when we begin to recognize that the majority of communication is silent. The majority of communication is silent. Peter Drucker, who was known as the founder of modern management, he was an Austrian author and educator. He said this, he said, the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. The most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. Now, I know because I went to ministerial school, and when you go to school for public speaking, which is, I think they say one of the top fears, it's like right up there with all the other fears, it may be the top one. But I don't actually know if they tell you this, but someone told me this. Someone gave me the stats on people's ability to listen to you and hear you and what will help you be able to connect with people as a speaker. And do you know what? Do you know what is above what you're saying? Do you know what is above your intelligence level? It's what you look like as far as how you show up. Because of the way our minds are programmed, how we show up, how we move, how we speak, our confidence level, how we look. Like if I, came all raggedy this morning, straight out of bed and was like, hey, if I still had some breakfast on my face, not that I had breakfast this morning, but if I did and I had it all over my face, it would communicate something, right? So the best thing you can do if you're going into a career public speaking, or if you have a presentation to make to a panel, or if you are facilitating something, educating, is to get a new great pair of shoes and show up slick. No, just kidding. But I do remember a time when I was an elementary school teacher, and there was a kerfuffle in the classroom because I was brought into this classroom to sub for the rest of the year for a teacher that was pregnant and having a baby and on leave. And there was a kerfuffle. The kindergarten parents did not want a new teacher in there. And regardless of who I was, they were ready to pick apart this person that was stepping into this classroom of their much beloved teacher. And I just remember things about where I went to school, what degree I had, this and that, and this and that. And I remember thinking about how I was showing up and recognizing that what I wore actually made a difference. Like it actually made a difference in the level of respect, not that was warranted by my consciousness or my education or my position, but it made a difference in how they treated me off the bat. And so I would never show up to parent-teacher conferences, in jeans. And even if we were allowed to, I wouldn't do that. I would dress for the part. I would dress for the consciousness of what made me feel secure, what made me feel confident and grounded. Everything communicates. Do you believe me? Because we're in for a ride. If you believe me, we're in for a ride, because there is so much potential and so much in the area of growth and awakening if we are willing to entertain the depth of the idea that everything communicates. Think about the best hug you've ever gotten. Just breathe into it. Or your best hugger, or the hugs you get from the little ones in your life, or a hug you got at a critical moment in your experience. Just think about that, feel it. Now think of a hug that you got that was awkward, inappropriate, disconnected, empty, polite. How we hug communicates. Everything communicates. To hear what isn't being said is a gift. It's a gift that helps us bring in the divine faculty of harmony, to harmonize experiences, because we have a developed capacity for understanding, intuiting, and hearing what is beneath the surface. Sometimes what's being said is so loud, it's screaming, even though your ears can't hear a thing. Sometimes you can experience a flood of suffering behind a smile. Sometimes you can feel resentment behind kindness. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. There is power in our words and power in our silence. Everything communicates. From what we say to what we fail to say. From how we move to how we drive. From how we parent to how we play, our lives speak volumes. Everything communicates. From how we sleep to how we eat. From what we give to what we withhold. From what we do and what we fail to do or leave to others to do for us. What we carry and what we let go. What we comment on and what we pass by. What we attend to and what we leave unattended. Everything communicates. From the way we hold to the way we scold. From how we laugh to how we cry to how we fight to how we try. Our lives speak volumes. How we apologize and how we forgive. How we love and how we live. Everything communicates. Communication can heal and harm. It can bring together, it can push apart, right? It can lift up and it can tear down. It can include and it can alienate. It can build confidence or it can destroy trust. It can inform or it can mislead. Acknowledging that our lives and how we live them sends a message, invites us into the idea of courageously practicing self-reflection. Courageously practicing self-reflection. I say courageously because all of us, when we practice self-reflection, will have a wake-up call. And as scripture says, we may be disturbed. We may be disturbed. We can inventory the quality and impact of our communication in our lives and in our world. So may we all be skillful in this communication field. May we be mindful of our shortcomings and conscious of our impact so that our lives can benefit all. Because how we show up communicates. It sends a living message about us. It sends the living message about our healing and about our consciousness. Even as far as what we share or what we spread, whether we're involved in gossip, whether we share and pass on stories that are not our own to share, that communicates. Whether there is integrity in the information we share, whether we've checked it or we've just passed it on, whether we're holding confidentiality around things that need confidentiality, and whether or not we're holding reverence around things that are calling for reverence. It all registers. It all communicates. The words you choose, the things you say, the things you send, right? I have a friend that was recently at the Holocaust Museum. It's a traveling experience that's coming through Kansas City right now. I had the gift of going to this museum when I served as the minister at Unity of Montclair in New Jersey. And we took anyone from the spiritual community who wanted to come onto a bus trip at that time down to see this exhibit. And it was a full-blown, full body, raw experience. You can't put it into words. You really can't communicate it. But a beloved friend went this last week to the one in Kansas City. And so we had a little bit of communication after, and she was sharing, and she is a former teacher, and she was an educator and counselor. And she was sharing that it was an incredible, a valuable, an eye-opening experience that communicated a lot. And then she was also sharing that there were some young ones there, some young girls, a group of young girls. And as they were there at the exhibit, they came in and they were talking and chatting. And at one point, while experiencing the museum, they began taking selfies. And so they began to hold up the camera at the exhibit with the young ones that died and taking pictures while smiling. Can you feel that? If you really allow yourself to fully feel that, you might start crying. Can you create the space to feel that? The silence to feel that? On so many levels, that story gives us a gift, a real gift, because that story shows us the power of communication. The power of communication. And this is not just a human power. This is a spiritual power. This is a spiritual conversation. Communication on so many levels in that experience is up to be expanded. Now, we could pass judgment and make criticisms, offer criticisms across the board. But here's the key to me. Here's the key that I think is essential. For the most part, as far as the human condition goes and humanity and community and each other, most of the injury that occurs, the hurt, the blame, the victimization, the experience, most of it is not intentional. Most of it comes from a lack of awareness, a lack of insight, a lack of spiritual growth, a lack, we could say, in consciousness. But if you think about the hurt in your own life, you think how much of that, how much of what my kind of pain body is in life, or my triggers, or what comes up for me when I do my healing work. Would you agree that so much of it was someone that was either hurting again and just passing on what they experienced, or someone not being aware of their impact, someone being ignorant or naive, someone not trying or not having a skill set? I think most of it's falling into that category when I think about life. Yes, there are dramatic stories of intentional harm and intentional hurt. Yes, there are deep insensitivities, but if you look at the work that people do through foundations and through people of power who are bringing people together to have conscious conversations, whether it's through politics and town hall meetings, whether it's through doing major healing work with cultures and governments and whatever it is, when you get people into a room and you get them to be authentic and you get them to show up, healing happens, because we realize we are just in this sea of miscommunication and missing the mark. And that's what the master teacher teaches, and we teach in unity, is sin. It's missing the mark. It comes from the archery term, to just hit it right in the center, to just get it right on. But so often we miss the mark. So what I see in this story today is that I see these young girls who will be soon moving into their womanhood and adulthood, who may have these pictures on their cell phones, on their social media accounts. And that doesn't go away. Once that happens, we have to answer for it. Right? There comes a day of reckoning when it comes back around to us, where we have to look at the mean little nasty things we did in childhood, or the times that we blew our lid, or whatever it is, the things that we did out of ignorance. And we grow, hopefully we grow as humans and as spiritual beings, and hopefully who we were before doesn't reflect the fullness of who we are now. And we have the opportunity to make amends. But I see that communication could have made all the difference in the world. So how could that experience have been different? Well, there could have been someone from the exhibit, and you know me, and if you know me, I haven't made the call yet myself, but I will be making the call. And I did suggest to this beloved that they make the call to share their experience, because what happened for us when we went in on the East Coast, when we went to this exhibit, is someone met us outside and they gave us a little orientation that was grounding, that helped us get centered, that helped us get off the bus where we may have been chatting and, you know, talking to each other and doing other things. We may have been cackling. Have you ever heard someone that isn't aware of their communication at a memorial? Holy moly moly. You can walk into a memorial and you can hear some person with a very loud voice just going yap, 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 yap. And it clashes and it bangs like cymbals in the sacred space. So I can see how communication would have had an impact. Something so simple as meeting this little field trip of teachers and young ladies outside of the building to give a brief orientation that helped them understand the energy they were moving into. I can see how communication from the facilitator or the teacher's part beforehand saying, let's look at some heart agreements. We're getting ready to process something and to experience something that is immense. And you know, if you know anything about kids and processing big things, sometimes laughter is a response to very intense experiences. Either intense healing experiences, or intense suffering experiences, or intense confusing that this is what humanity does experiences. I remember some giggling at my grandpa's funeral, and I remember someone saying, it's okay, it's okay. They just brought us to another space where it was okay to play and giggle, but they recognized that for whatever reason, even at your grandpa's funeral, that could be the experience of very young kids. And so they found the place that would be honorable and helpful and connecting for us to do that. I remember taking my Reiki training with my sister when I was probably 19 or 20 years old, and I was in a Reiki course, and I can remember us in this course. Everyone else, of course, was, well into adulthood, except for the two of us. And we were doing therapeutic touch and Reiki training. And I can remember the overwhelming feeling of needing to giggle. I can remember when we're doing hands-on with each other and practicing with each other, I can remember both of us just holding it in, just trying not, everyone else's eyes are closed and they're reverent and they're peaceful. And we were just like about to explode with this energy. What I know now with spiritual practice is that that's energy. Something was communicating there. It was being brought up. And until you have all the tools to understand what's really happening in the depth of power experiences, you have interesting responses. So what I know about these young ladies is nothing about the quality of their character, but it's all about the possibilities that can unfold with them and in them when communication is conscious, mindful, and clear. Communication matters. Communication has impact. So it doesn't just matter what we meant by something or what we mean by something. It does matter what was received and what is received when we show up to our world and to ourselves. It doesn't mean that we're all called to shape shift or be entirely politically correct or to be in fear or contort ourselves to be what others need us to be to feel comfortable. It's not about avoiding important issues. It's not about failing to confront things that need to be addressed. But it's about a higher level of conscious awareness around how we communicate, how our communications are received, and the impact that has on our world, on our community, and in our lives. Bible scholars have even used the fullness of what is spoken, what's between the words, what underlies the words and the words themselves, to discern what was really said by the master teacher, Jesus the Christ, in the red letter version of Scripture. How do they do that? How did they figure that out? To the best of their ability, these scholars came together and they analyzed the languaging in Scripture. And from that, they were able to put together who may have been saying what. Think about it like this. If I read to you a sermon that someone else wrote, if I delivered a talk that someone else wrote, I bet you, if you were paying attention, you would know right off the bat. You would know that it doesn't match my essence, it doesn't match my consciousness, it doesn't match my flow, it doesn't match the speed of my voice. And that's what they did in this scriptural uncovering. They looked at what's Jesus's tone, what's his voice, what are his mannerisms, what is his consciousness? And they were able to discern a distinct style of communication that they could attribute it to Jesus. And what do you think happened to this scripture that was this long, that Jesus said all of this and taught all of this? the red letter version. But that's not what we see in scripture. We see this elongated version that is actually the voice of many, that is actually the consciousness of many, often attributing it to the one. Our consciousness also reveals our awareness and our skill set. It reveals our unhealed issues, our communication. It reveals our unhealed issues. It reveals our path of spiritual development, our emotional maturity, and it reveals our pain body. Has anyone had their pain body revealed by their communication? You want to know my pain body? Listen deeply to what I say. Watch deeply to what I react to. Feel deeply the emotions that I experience, and then backtrack to see what thought or what experience ignited them. The messages we're sending are vast. We think we're just sharing the messages of our words or our gestures. But the messages we send and we communicate show if we're injured, they show when we're angry, they show where we're immature, they show where we have healing work to do, they show where we are insecure. What do you think of when you hear a motorcycle driving by or a car and revving its engine extremely loud or blasting its music so that everyone hears, probably not the person in the car because they're probably deaf by now, but everyone else hears the song and the lyrics to what they're playing? What do you think of? Do you think there's a person of confidence there that just loves the glory of music and wants to gift it to the world? Do you think, wow, that's a strong man or woman? Or do you have other thoughts? What does it communicate? Do you think they think that's what it communicates? Now, I'll leave this to personal discussions in social media, but what people think they're communicating when they show up in certain ways is not always aligned with what is being received. So what messages do we want to be sending? Because it is clear that if we really understood the fullness of our communications, we would certainly change some behaviors. I believe all of us would. From the way we look down when we enter a room, or the way we open our hearts and come to people. Now, not all of that is under our control. A lot of that is just how we are, how we're built in our personality, but we can take strides to align our communications with our intention. With our intention. You know, when I was running some of our youth and family ministry camps, I remember, because I am big on, if we know we have a shortcoming, communicate it. You know, if you know, like, some of us have a resting face, that like a face that when we're not really paying attention, and it's like, and we might not be trying to say like, y'all don't matter to me and this is just ridiculous, but the face says, you are ridiculous, I'm not even here. If we know that about ourselves, communicate it, right? Pre-teach it, share. If we know we have shortcomings that could be wildly misunderstood, get in front of that bus and turn it into a party bus. I know this, and here's the party. It's going to come your way. You're going to hear that bus rolling down the street, and that's part of me, and I'm aware of it. It is part of my spiritual growth and my practice, and what I want you to know is this is my intention. This is who I am, and this is what I'd like for you to know and see about me, or know and feel when you see this come up. This is the space I'd like you to hold. But when I was leading the youth and family ministry camp, I remember, you know, we had so many kids, and I used to be a teacher. I used to be an elementary school teacher, and we had so many kids. And I remember thinking of things to, you know, do with them, engage with them. And I had heard that at one point they went through the bookstore. So the community center is behind the bookstore. Outside, one way to get outside is in front of the bookstore. And they went through the bookstore. All of them. Do you think it was pretty? It wasn't so pretty. But when I was there, I brought them all together. I circled them all up. And I talked about how we show up for the bookstore. I communicated my faith in them. I communicated reverence for the experience of going to the bookstore. I let them know that most adults wouldn't choose to take a group of 30 to 50 kids through a little bookstore with fragile things, with people that are shopping and doing business. I went through all of these things with them. And then I told them how we were going to do it and what they could do in there. I want you to find 3 things that inspire you. I want you to find one place and stand there and just look and experience it. And we're going to go in this way and that way. We're going to do this. And then when I do this, we're all going to walk out the front door. So not only did I communicate with them, but I also gave one of my best friends who ran the bookstore a heads up. And I asked for approval. I communicated. I said, this is what I want to do. And I want to give them an experience of success doing this. Are you on board with me? And as a lover of young ones and a knower of the potential that young ones have, she said, absolutely. And you know what happened when we did it? Incredible. It was really a sacred experience. It was really beautiful. And they felt so proud of themselves. They didn't run through the bookstore. They weren't screaming in there. I mean, I would even bet to say that if someone was in there at that time shopping, they've probably retold that story a million times because these young ones showed up in an amazing way. But how often do we fail to communicate? How often do we enter a sanctuary without first communicating the reverence that is requested by that sanctuary? How often do we enter into a conversation without honoring the reverence called for to have that caliber of a conversation? Think for just a moment about something in your life that a deeper awareness and a higher consciousness, an expansion of mindfulness would have transformed. So if we ever feel like someone's response to us doesn't match who we are, we said something, we did something, we posted something, you fill in the blank. If someone's response to us, we're like, what are they thinking? That's not who I am. There are really 2 options. It's either about them or it's about you, right? It's either about them or it's about you. I love this quote that Dirk, one of our social media volunteers, what he posted into the community room. He said, from Wayne Dyer, he said, when you judge another, you do not define them, you define yourself. When you judge another, you do not define them, you define yourself. And then we have the unity practice and the teaching and new thought and expanded awareness that what they think isn't about me. So you've got, I'm defined by what I think, what they think isn't about me. You've got, if how I'm showing up doesn't align with what they're experiencing, it's either in what they're experiencing or it's in my mind and my consciousness. Kind of confusing, right? As far as like, well, what do I do about that? Because the ego is so saucy that 9 times out of 10, if it's about you, you'll hop into the little bit and you'll be like, it's about them. This is not my business what they think. It's all in their perception. I am heaven on earth and poo in your consciousness. And when it's about them, you may often think, God, what's wrong with me? How am I still not communicating what I am really intending to communicate? What am I missing here? So here's another option. If we can recognize that an intellectual inquiry into that process is futile, hear that again, an intellectual inquiry into that process is futile because of the natural and glorious operations of the ego, and because we can't see what we're seeing with. You get that? We can't see what we're seeing with. We can't see what we're immersed in. I can't see my own eyes. We can't even see a picture of our own bodies. We can't even see our own selves from the outside. We can see a photo, we can see an image, but we can't really see ourselves. So again, when an intellectual inquiry into that process is futile and you can't see what you are seeing with, what do? We launch a spiritual inquiry, a courageous, radical inventory with prayer and awareness. And we do the Missouri prayer, which is show me. Missouri is the show me state, and we do the show me prayer from a spiritual perspective. We go to Ephesians 5:8. For at one time you were in darkness, but now you are in light in the Lord. And metaphysically, being in light in the Lord is the law. I am in alignment with the law. Walk as children of the light. From Psalm 119, 105, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. So we dive in with a spiritual lens. But we have to ask for that, I believe. I really believe we have to ask for it to be shown to us in a way that we can hear. And when we do that prayer, when we say, show me, something happens. And we become aware of aspects of ourselves, our communication, our consciousness, so that we can be grown. And another thing happens. We're often more compassionately aware of what's going on with someone else or the world around us. And we care less about being treated right and more about having positive regard for someone else that may be in suffering, in ignorance, or in discord. And then we begin to do the spiritual work behind that, compassionately praying them up, compassionately communicating, compassionately becoming conscious of how we all impact our world, each other, and the world around us. Why is this so important? It's so important because all of life is relationship. Yes, there is unity and we are all one, but on this earth plane, life appears to us as relationship, the world around us and the world within us, relationship to self, to higher self, relationship to our source, relationship to others, relationship to our community, and communication and our skills and our spiritual practice around that make a heaven or a hell out of life. Let's make it a heaven. Namaste.